Very well, guys. Welcome to another video. In the previous lesson, we had talked about the generalities of writing, some of the modalities, the definition, um, the mechanics, and everything else, right? We also established some practice in order for you to um, um, write consciously about certain topics and mix certain things about orality that hopefully I will be able to notice when I'm grading your assignments and checking the comments. Always check the comments now. Like usually, I spend some time writing those comments for you to sort of locate important things about the things you write. Very well. So here we're going to finish this topic of the written modality by analyzing very quickly certain things about short text and long texts. So here, pretty similar to what we did in the assignment of the last week, in which you were trying to propose certain ways to use orality into those categories. Well, let's try to do this this week the same, but with writing in a very short way, right? So we have short text. Of course, length and dimension sometimes is let's say subjective things, right? Like for some short text maybe of a certain extension, of a certain amount of words, and long with the other ones. Nevertheless, let's agree on that some of these are short text, just as signs, the ones that we find in restaurants, in pubs, for advertisement, for publicity, names of offices, names of buildings, or simply information such as the one that we did during the first week, I think. Yes, there was, for example, the for sale sign or the stop sign, all these different things, right? Really short texts. Then advertisements that are pretty much included into the previous ones, only that they are not necessarily always signs. Meaning that they're not always on the street or they are not always on big scale. So we can be talking about advertisement in newspapers, pop-ups in Facebook, in social networks, in the internet, and well, all these different ways that present ourselves as publicity for something, for selling something, for buying something, for promoting a place, for promoting some sort of practice, etc. Then we have letters, right? Letters are less and less common these days. Usually they have like a formal component. Usually you're required to send a letter to the faculty, a letter to a public office, a letter maybe to some sort of paperwork that you require for a legal purchase or something like that, right? In the past, letters were much more personal and they had like different implications. Nowadays, well, of course, there are people who still write letters and even use the email to replicate that experience of writing letters, but nowadays, and especially you guys, I'm not sure if it's so common for you, but well, those can be sort of interpreted or classified as short text or short use of writing. Notes, again, it can be a note that you can pass physically from a friend in class, or the ones that we have mentioned in the previous exercise about the ones that you can just put in the fridge. Or well, let's say that there are certain things mediated by technology, such as WhatsApp messages or text messages, that may be somehow analogized to a note, right? Banners, when we're talking about these long horizontal ones that promote a political candidate or that inform you in the highway that there is a deviation or there is work ahead or something like that. And of course lists, no? Let's say that this list can be as simple as going to the supermarket and having a list of things to buy, or a list of features, or a list of characteristics, or a list of materials that you require to buy before the initiation of the school year. Well, all these different things, right? So we have this writing condensed into these short, let's say, categories, and also we have the long ones now. So if you go to the slide 37, you will see that we have novels, poetic anthologies, and there's like a typo in there, sorry guys, treatises, essays, dictionaries, manuals, diaries, right? Well, I don't need to explain each and every one of those. You will see that those are different ways in which extensive writing is produced because of the number of pages, because of the volume of information that is managed about the same topic without interruptions, because of the general, let's say, the general purpose of each, right? Like normally we have each of these texts has a general purpose, no matter that we have hundreds and thousands of pages. They more or less are about the same thing, or the same category, or the same goal, right? So they may have all these different things over here, and of course writing is useful for all of this. Now those are just a couple, yes, in terms of short and long texts, and well, probably you can come up with other ideas and different ways to use them in different contexts, right? Some of them that may not be here, but well, those are like the most common ones. Well guys, if we go to the slide number 38, we're going to get into the business over here, that is modalities of discourse organization. I remember very well that when I was in composition, I mentioned all the time, like when you are in formas, if you're with me, well, in general, in formas, we are going to go deeper into certain of the categories that we explored merely as paragraphs in composition, right? So in reading and composition workshop, we basically explored descriptive paragraphs, narrative paragraphs, argumentative paragraphs, right? Those three categories. So we are going to exemplify here and go even more deep. We're going to go deeper into these categories over here, these different modalities of discourse organization. We're going to see some other components. Of course, some of the general definitions are going to be the same, some of the general components will be the same, but definitely we're going to go deeper in here. So hopefully you can use part of that knowledge that you acquired there, and specifically, more importantly, that skill that you developed, hopefully at writing different types of paragraphs, so you can write better and more complex and more original text than that. Okay, so let's discuss a little bit about these modalities of discourse organization. Okay, so how can they be defined? They are prototypical sequences, schematics of fundamental ways to construct discourses. What does it mean? They are like formulas or classifications or structures in which ideally or normally or traditionally somehow a discourse have been presented, right? So if for present simple we have a pretty common structure such as affirmative sentence, present simple can be subject plus verb plus complement. Well, we also have some of these characteristics a little bit more complex and fuller of details and variables, but nevertheless somehow they are prototypical. Prototypical means that let's say a discourse that is descriptive or narrative or argumentative or journalistic is expected to have certain components to be classified as such, right? So that is why we're going to be talking about prototypical sequences or structures, right? Nevertheless, let's say that under normal natural conditions, a discourse is a mixture of all these different categories, right? So in our day-to-day life, normally we mix the narrative plus the descriptive plus the uh, argumentative, right? Even the journalistic sometimes, depending of our level of technicity and well, some other things. So if that is what happens in real life, let's say that this division has a purpose of presenting essential characteristics. Um, we're going to divide them into the categories that I have already mentioned, or the modalities, yeah, because we would like to recognize those essential characteristics, those things that are going to help us discovering what is the modality that we are managing, and let's say consciously strive towards the best practices in such modalities, right? Ideally, we will have then eventually the possibility of mixing all of those in our communication, in our discourse, and putting them all together and adapting them, and do that really quickly, right? Do that in a real quick way, without getting confused, right? So hopefully at the end of the course, or at some point in the course, we will be completely able to do that, and believe me guys, it's a really important skill that we are able to switch between one and the other, and we recognize when are we doing what. Okay, very well. So let's go to the slide number 39, and let's start with our first modality, that is description. Okay, so let's talk about descriptive discourse. You had already hopefully talk a little bit about this in the past. I for sure know that you did, the ones that were with me in composition before. So we talk about this sensorial and sensitive perception of the world, and we even work with this chart of the senses, no? So with sight and touch, etc., the five senses. So we're going to amplify this a little bit, okay? So remember that the description is a linguistic representation of the real imaginary world, right? So we can describe things that we see, things that we can touch, things that exist in the real world, or things that are fictional. Yes, I can perfectly describe you a monster, a planet that doesn't exist, a machine that can do impossible things, right? And if my discursive abilities are good, you should be able to see and picture that thing without a lot of trouble, right? Remember, well, hopefully you already inferred this, but remember that description can be both oral or written, right? That's why we sort of approach first to those concepts, and then hopefully later you're going to integrate that, no? So it's either the written or oral linguistic representation of these fictional or realistic worlds, right? And when we say worlds, well, think about anything that can be in the world, no? Like a person, an animal, an object, a place, etc., right? So normally these are the expression of the perceptions of the senses. We had already mentioned that before. So you can describe anything in terms of how it looks, how does it smell, how does it taste, the noise that it produces, etc., right? Now I remember that back then in composition we describe mostly physical things, and that is why senses in there are essential, no? Probably we did a couple of exercises, not completely sure, but probably one or two, not many, about intangible things, right? About feelings or emotions. That then it gets a little bit harder, no? Like how are you going to describe the smell of pain, yes, or the taste of sadness? Well, there are ways to do that, but of course, not necessarily you're going to think about that immediately as you would think about something physical, no? Now, the thing is that we can describe, apart from physical and intangible, some other things that are, well, still in that category, but probably can be more specific, right? Such as states, right? We can describe states, and normally when you think about states, if you were in school, like you were supposed to think about the states of matter. Yes, it is physical or liquid or gas, or some of the intermediate ones. So think about that, but also think about states in terms of change, right? Of how one situation, person, emotion, animal, place, or anything can change. Yes, from one state to another, from happy to sad, from old, from new to old, from smooth to harsh, well, different things like that, right? So anything that implies change can be described, and that is why processes can also be described. Yes, you can think about a step-by-step somehow description of a process to assemble, I don't know, a library. It's a pain, by the way, or to install something into your computer, right? A program or something like that. Or the process to put together a machine, or the process in order to create a lesson plan. Well, all of those are processes that are suitable of being described, right? And we have to be aware that this is normally carried out from a determined perspective or point of view. There's a typo over there in the presentation. I just spotted. Sorry. So normally, when you're describing, you're going to adopt a position. You're going to adopt a point of view. Yes, and that can be objective, or can be subjective, or can be since a particular role, or well, different things that we're going to consider in a moment, right? Now, so here there are like certain aspects that we are going to include in the description, no? Like certain components that make a description, that make discursive, descriptive discourse what it is, right? Now, normally a description has a purpose. Yes, you want to describe something because of a reason, right? So it's normally to persuade somebody of something. Yes. So let's say that you start describing your TV and all the functions that it has, or your cell phone, and in the end, what you want to do is that your friend or your mom or whoever buys the same cell phone, or you describe it, because you want it for a gift, I don't know, next Christmas, and that's why you do it. Yes. Criticize, probably you do it, I don't know, you talk about a movie or a book or a song or a piece of clothes or a restaurant, and you do that because you want to criticize it, and you don't want people to see that movie or go to that restaurant or buy that thing. Yes. Maybe you do it that way. Yes, you start let's say analyzing or describing certain things about how you didn't like the smell of the restaurant, and how it was all crowded, and how the waiter took forever to bring you the food, and how the food tasted in a really, really bad way. Well, so there are different ways that you can do. Now, not all critique is bad. Like, you can criticize something to exalt its qualities as well, so that you will be doing the opposite, not promoting that, or even like saying pros and cons in a very objective way, so the product, the person, the place can be improved. No, you can also describe in order to inform, only to inform. So let's say certain TV news are supposed to be that way. No, you only present the news, but you do not take a position. Just you only want to inform the viewer, and that's it. Same may happen for a schedule for the subjects in the BA. They normally tell you, the teacher, schedule, the days, days and hours, and the classroom, right? It's pretty informative. No, it's describing, but it's supposedly, there's nothing in there that can convince you about taking certain things. Now, you decide later on, because of comments of other people, because your own experience, because your own necessities, right, or preferences, what class to take. To mock, you can describe somebody to make fun of him or her, right? You can describe his or her physical defects, or faults, or you can describe his or her personality flaws, and all of these with the purpose of making fun of that person, right? Or a place, or whatever. Or to move, yes? Move, it's to inspire feelings, no? To inspire sometimes tears, to provoke this reaction of oh in the other person, right? And we have a lot of different let's say ways to do that. We have all been moved at some point, hopefully, by a movie, by a poem, by a text, by a story, by an image, by a photograph, whatever, right? And all of this is part of description. Now, it is important that you start following this following set of questions when you are describing something, right? So every time that you are going to write or produce orally a description, you're going to try to answer always these questions, okay? What is it? What is it that you're describing? Whatever it is, an animal, a person, a place, we already mentioned that. How is it? So this how is it may include everything related to the appearance and everything perceived by the senses. What parts does it have? Like, can you decompose these into different components? Can you say these have I don't know, this bicycle has pedals and wheels and a chair and a seat, sorry, not a chair, and brakes and gears, etc. What is it used for? Right? There is a purpose for it. Yes. What does it do? Let's say that what would be the difference in there? No, what is it used for and what does it do? So, for example, a bicycle. What is it used for? It's used for transportation, right? And what does it do? Well, it by using a chain, it takes advantage of the human force or human energy in order to rotate the wheels, and because of that, it is able to transport the person, right? So hopefully, that example is more or less clear between the difference of what is it used for and what does it do, right? How does it behave? Well, this is mostly for sentient beings. Not all the times you are able to answer this question. So if you're talking about an object or a place, even sometimes maybe places can behave somehow by saying that it is windy or foggy or rainy or something like that. But most of the cases, it is for animated things like people or animals. What does it look like? Yes. So let's say that these are a bunch of questions that are normally put together over here, try to do your best in order to answer all of these questions when you are describing anything. Yes. For some things it may be like easier. Some other ones maybe you definitely cannot say like how to answer some of those, but well, try to do your best to answer all of them. If definitely you're unable to do it, well, but try. And of course, well, one more time, this can apply to states or processes, and again, it has a point of view. Well, guys, with this we're done with the video for this part of the video. What we're going to do in the final part is to approach the graphic that is in the slide number 41. Yes, there is some sort of chart over there. It's like a scheme, and we're going to try to complete that with a particular object, or any of the categories that I have already mentioned, and then you're going to do one of those yourselves. Okay, so hopefully we can pay close attention to the example that I'm going to give you, and later on that will be the second assignment, you producing one of those for a different thing. Okay, so thank you very much then for your attention, guys. See you on the next video. Bye bye.